What a intro song. Good morning, everybody. This is Man Coverage, college football's biggest show on the biggest stage, on the biggest day, Sunday, the day after, where we talk about what happened yesterday. Mr. Bonneville, how are you doing today, sir?
Good. I mean, it wasn't as action-packed as week 2 was, but there was a lot of questions answered this week that are going to help us out in week 4 and 5. So it's going to be fun. So let it ride. Let's go.
Yeah, dude. I wasn't as fired up about this weekend just because there wasn't that marquee matchup. But honestly, there was a lot of games that caught me off guard. There was a lot of teams that kind of showed up that people really didn't give a shot to, and some teams that made their mark. So we got a lot to talk about. We also have a tremendous guest today. One of my all-time favorite players in the sport of college football, a hero of sorts in Boulder, Colorado, the 1989 College Football Player of the Year, Darian Hagan, 1990 National Championship quarterback for the Colorado Buffaloes. He is going to join us today on the show. Actually, he joined us on Thursday, and we taped his interview, so we're going to replay that interview for you today because he had to travel this weekend to James's neck of the woods as the Buffaloes took on Minnesota. So we're going to play that interview for you guys, and I want you all to hang out and stick around because we're going to break down all the games like we always do for college football. Knoxville Nate, James Bonneville here on Man Coverage. And then we're going to play the interview with Colorado legend Darian Hagan, who is now the running backs coach at Colorado. First game, James, that we need to discuss is definitely the A&M game that went down. We got a comment here first off, right off the bat. Andy Bradford, who is a Colorado resident, mind you, who says Darian Hagan over Rocket Ismail. Hey, talking about that, we got to bring up Bradford, the infamous clip that came down in that national championship game where Rocket Ismail took a punt return to the house, and there was a flag for a clip, which I have watched that game 10 times. I've never seen the clip. But maybe Bonneville, did you see it?
I did not, but I never got to saw the all-22 on that one either. So
no, I did not. I didn't have the all-22, but I got to tell you, the all-22 is my favorite.
Absolutely.
I've got the ESPN app, so I can watch all the games, and I go down through, and I'm like, do I want to hear two idiots screwing up the game for me, or do I want to watch the all-22, get to see the holes open up, and don't have to listen to the stupid commentators? And so I choose that every time. But Rocket Ismail, another good name. Maybe we should have him on the show too, because that guy was also a legend. But
absolutely,
we don't have Rocket today, but we do have Darian Hagan, as I said, 1989 College Football Player of the Year. He'll be joining us about the halfway mark through the show. But we got to get down to business first. Texas A&M wounded coming into this weekend, obviously after the home defeat to Appalachian State. We've all seen the video of the yell practice where Zach, the head yeller, can't believe I'm even saying that, but the head yeller says that he didn't know where Boone, North Carolina was. He had to look up on Google to make sure that Appalachian State was a actual team. Well, and then they came into their stadium and really just kicked their ass. I mean, it wasn't like it was a fluke. I mean, they dominated them all day. And if it weren't for that kick return, they would have had one score all day long. So Texas A&M was wounded. There was a lot of question marks going into this weekend. Jimbo was considering relinquishing play calling duties. I'd never really heard the final word on whether he did or not. We'll ask James that here in a second. But I do know that he swapped out the quarterbacks. He brought in the transfer, Max Johnson, the guy from LSU. And had him take over the team. He didn't look great out there, Max Johnson, but I did think that he looked better than the previous guy, Haynes. And I said that from the beginning that, I said, if they're picking this Haynes guy to be the starter, they're in trouble. They ended up winning 17-9. I think it was more an indictment on how bad the Canes really are, in my opinion, and not really how good Texas A&M is. But this is a game that Texas A&M had to win at home to stay alive in this season. James, what did you think about the offense with Max Johnson at the helm? And what do you think about both these teams moving forward after this game?
Well, I by the way, the byline, you got it wrong. It was 17-9. It was 24-17 was that Cal Notre Dame score we talked about before. So just to let you know on that, 17-9 was the score of A&M Miami. Let's start off with Texas A&M, who's
yeah. That was the ranking, but yeah, thanks for pointing me out.
Not a problem.
There, but yeah,
you know, you start off with A&M, and honestly, they got to get into 2020s offensively. Through the first two games, Texas Tech actually had more plays in one game than Texas A&M had in two. They got to do something more original. Because, I mean, you look at Haynes King. I mean, he's a high school legend in that state. And this offense is so pedestrian and so slow. They're gonna have to win on defense to win games. And they've got defensive talent to do that. But, I mean, it is so deliberate and so slow that they don't get to really value the talent pool they have. And their receivers really don't have – I mean, they're not developing well at the position. And you got to change it up. And quite frankly, I think if I'm the AD at Texas A&M, I'm putting real pressure on Jimbo to bring somebody in full-time to call the plays, and you act as a CEO rather than being the play caller. I mean, 10 of 20 for Max Johnson. I mean, Devin Achane had, 80-some yards? It was an ugly game, but Miami not having much at receiver really hurt them in this game. I mean, 17-9, this was just more of a mud fight than anything. And
I think it just shows that Texas A&M is good on defense. I mean, they're legit good players. They're legitimate defensive team, but this whole thought back that Jimbo is an offensive guru.
Oh God,
needs to be rethought. He's not, and I don't understand why he thinks he is, and I don't understand why some other people think he is, because it's proven week in, week out that his offense is pedestrian at best.
I mean, honest to God, he's starting to become Lloyd Carr, which was going into the year. There's a lot of hype and a lot of predictions and a lot of 8-4, 9-3. And I mean, you look down his schedule going down the line. I mean, they got to play Arkansas next week. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to take Arkansas in that game at Mississippi State. Mike Leach is going to have them up for that game at Alabama. I pretty much put that one in the bank. Alabama's going to roll them. At South Carolina, they'll win, but home against Ole Miss, I don't see that being a game. I mean, you go down the line, their schedule gets a lot better, but after that, I mean, I keep seeing 8-4 the way this team's playing. What do you think?
8-4 is kind of stretching it. Honestly, if they lost this game yesterday, I was thinking more along the lines of 4-8. I think winning this game definitely helped them and propelled them to, having a winning season by chance. But they play in the SEC West, buddy. I mean, there's no slouches in that division. I like a lot of the teams. Ole Miss is looking better. Mississippi State is no joke. We'll talk about them here in a minute, what they did yesterday. But, Auburn, I think they can beat. There's a couple games that are winnable for them, but if their offense doesn't play better and start clicking, who knows? I mean, who can they beat? I don't know. They could have beat Appalachian State, and honestly, yesterday, as we've discussed a couple of times here, they scored 17 points and didn't look great doing it. So unless something changes drastically on that offense, I don't know who they're going to beat, but nothing's going to change. They already did the big change. They brought the quarterback, the other quarterback in, who honestly I thought should have been starting from the beginning. The guy's not great. We saw him last year at LSU, but he did throw around 27 touchdowns and 6 picks. So that's a good ratio, and looked better than Miles Brennan, in my opinion, once he came in and took over for that Tiger team. So I don't know. I don't really know how to judge this win, honestly, because as I mentioned on the get-go, I think it's more indictment on Miami than I do Texas A&M. Everyone's been high on Miami. They've been riding the Canes for weeks. I've not been one of those people. I don't think they're as good as they've been advertised to be. We'll see how the rest of the season goes for them. But what's your thoughts on Miami, especially after you watch this game, James?
Well, I mean, the ACC is such a crapshoot to begin with. I mean, quite frankly, I look down the line and, who wins it? I can't for the life of me tell you there's nobody out there definitively that just knocks my socks off in the ACC. I mean, honestly, I think Florida State's going to have a better record, but I mean, where do you put at one point I was like, you got to put Miami up there because who else is left? But who had they played? I mean, they played what? Nobody. I mean, it's going to be a crapshoot down the stretch of really who gets hot from mid-October on the second half of the season. So,
yeah, I don't know, honestly, how good the ACC is, but so far I'm not impressed with most of the teams that I've seen. But we'll see what happens. I just thought we need to talk about that game first. It was one of the ranked matchup games in yesterday, and it was a big game, in my opinion, for A&M. I mean, they lose that game, they're effed. Their season goes down the toilet, and he loses that locker room completely, in my opinion. So,
well, especially as young as they are. I mean, they're so young they are. I mean, they're just fragile right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, this team could have just taken a huge nosedive, in my opinion, had they lost that game, and the season could have been lost. So I'll give Jimbo credit for winning that because it was kind of a must-win game, as we discussed last week. Staying on another game that involved a ranked team, we've got to touch a little bit about the battle out there with Oregon and BYU. I've got to be honest, this one kind of shocked me. We saw week one, Bo Nix looked horrible. They got destroyed by Georgia. Georgia is the best team in the country, in my opinion, in pretty much everyone's opinion, I think. They're dominant on defense. They're getting it done on offense. Georgia's number one. So I guess losing to them is not a big deal, but getting shellackled like they did really hurt my opinion of Oregon. And I guess I didn't think they had this in them. Now, BYU's top two receivers didn't play. So that may have hindered them a little bit, but honestly, they just looked lost all game, in my opinion. And, this game wasn't as close as the score makes it look, to be honest, in my view. What did you think about Oregon and BYU?
Well, Oregon just came out firing. I mean, they had a good week the week before against Eastern Washington, which they should have. But they looked a lot more cohesive as a whole. I mean, hell, through three quarters, they were winning 38-7. I mean, calling it 41-20 is such an understatement because this game could have easily been 55-14 just as easily. I think you got to look at their whole. I mean, sure, BYU was out their top two receivers, but they held that running game for BYU down quite a bit. I mean, leading rusher at 10 carries for 28 yards. I mean, that is. And Bo Nix looked decent, like he actually managed the game. But a guy I keep looking back to over and over again is the Minnesota transfer Bucky Irving out of the South Side of Chicago. 14 carries, 97 yards. The kid's a sophomore. He's legit. He's a legit running back who I think is going to have a high upside in 23 and 24.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought him up because we will actually discuss him a little bit later as he was, I believe, at Colorado before, correct?
No, Minnesota.
Oh, Minnesota. Yeah,
Minnesota. Yeah, he was the fifth or sixth string running back, and after injuries and transfers, he and Kai Thomas took over. Kai ended up transferring to KU, and Bucky transferred to Oregon. And, you look at Bucky, you could just see the talent there, but at Minnesota this year, at best, he was going to be a third or fourth string running back. So I think he was going to look for playing time and found it and is doing quite well in that Oregon offense.
Yeah, I agree. And, Bo Nix did play better. I mean, he was only 13 of 18, but he looked good when he had to make some decisions. My biggest thing in this game was the Oregon offensive line dominated BYU's defensive line.
100%.
That's the reason this game was won. I watched the All-22 copy, and I saw holes opening up. Oregon rushed for 212 yards, and that's with a negative 22-yard rush in there from Seven McGee. So honestly, it was a little bit more than that, but they dominated them on the offensive line. Oregon just looked like a much more physical team. Jaron Hall, the guy that has played very well for BYU, wasn't that bad. Still had some decent stat line, 29 of 41 for 305, 2 touchdowns, no picks, but they just couldn't get anything going on the ground. I mean, BYU had 60 yards rushing on 24 carries. That's 2.5 per clip. That's not going to get it done, especially against a ranked opponent.
Well, and Noah Sewell's a legit linebacker.
I love that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he is just like his brother from a toughness standpoint. So,
yeah, I do like that guy. And, Dan Lanning, the head coach at Oregon, obviously coming from Georgia, knows defense, knows what he's doing. And hopefully, he's getting that team turned around because they had a really good season last year and came in with high expectations, dropped a egg on week 1. But as we mentioned, that was against the number 1 team in the country. So we're not gonna shoot him in the leg too much for that one. Moving on, we've got to discuss the Sparty, who went out, I believe it was to Washington, correct? That was on the road. Yeah,
Correct.
on the road to go see Washington. Washington was unranked, kind of unproven, as we talked about. They played Kent State, Portland State, blew both these teams out on the first 2 weeks, but looked good doing it, but we just didn't really know what they had. I thought Sparty and Mel Tucker would go out there and take care of business. They did not. And in fact, Washington surprised me. I like this quarterback. I didn't know a ton about him, honestly, going into this year. I mean, I heard his name, kind of knew who he was, but, Michael Penix Jr., dude, he's a kid from Indiana who, you sleep on him and he'll rip you up. He threw for almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, we've seen this out of Michael Penix before, but it's been, a couple years and a couple injuries ago. So yeah. I was very happy to see him go out there and do it. I knew he could do it, but I just didn't know, whether the injuries had started to take their toll on him, as he's had a couple major ones. What did you think about Washington taking care of business in Husky Stadium, 39-28?
Well, it goes back to talking about what we talked about at the beginning of the season about influential hires. And I talked about Kalen DeBoer quite a bit. Yeah. I mean, you saw his work at Sioux Falls. I mean, throughout his entire head coaching career, this guy has lost a total of 9 games. That's it. 9 games. And it's not like he's coached a year or two. Between NAIA and being a head coach at Fresno State, he has coached probably close to 7 years. That's impressive. And this team is really solid. Now, do I think they're going to rip it up and you're going to see them playing for a college football playoff team? No. But you're going to see a huge upgrade offensively, which we talked about early in the season, because Kalen DeBoer is so offensively oriented, and him bringing Michael Penix in, who already had an electric arm at Indiana when he was the OC there, has just helped him greatly. And, I mean, you look at Polk, the former Texas Tech transfer. I mean, he has really come into his own and had one hell of a game. I mean, heck, yesterday alone, 6 catches, 153 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Wow. And, I mean, they exploited where Michigan State is suffering at, and that's in their defensive backfield. Yeah, I think that is something where Michigan State's really got to work on moving it, going ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think they're ready for the title, but can they win the Pac-12? I mean, is this a team that can compete out there in the Pac-12 against the likes of, Utah, in the likes of USC? Do they have a shot to contend? So. You think so?
I do. I mean, honestly, everybody has been so down on the Pac-12 going into this year, including me. I'm not going to lie. I was. But there's been a lot of surprises that have popped up, and Washington being one of those surprises that is exceeding expectations. I mean, Oregon is coming back around. I mean, I've got to get a few more data points on them. Oregon State looks really good. Utah, is going to be a good second half team. UCLA and USC are right there. This is going to come down to who really looks good in the second half of the season. But what I see right now from Washington, get your track shoes on, because you're going to have to score points to beat them, and they're going to go vertical.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And that was, there was a quarterback battle going on. Yeah. In the off season, we weren't 100% sure if Penix would win the job. If he did win it, what would he look like? And the first couple of weeks, it was hard to tell really with the competition, but this was a decent, Michigan State team. I believe they were ranked 11 going into this game, and he shredded them just like he did when he was at Indiana. So it looked like the Michael Penix of old, in my opinion. And if he can play like that, I mean, we saw him in 2020 when he just willed the Hoosiers to victories. Remember that game in Penn State game when he just, looked like a warrior out there, diving for 2-point conversions and throwing dimes. I love this kid, and I'm really happy for him because that was a big win yesterday, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Cool. Let's move on because I do want to talk about another Big Ten team who hasn't really been getting tons of pub this year so far. They had a pretty decent win in week 1 against Purdue. They got lucky to do it because there was some questionable play calling by Coach Braum in the fourth quarter by Purdue. They had the lead and couldn't run the clock out, but Penn State was able to win that game and stay undefeated going into yesterday's matchup. It was a rematch from last year, and Penn State, I believe, had to go down to the Plains to play Auburn. And hell, it was just a disaster for the Auburn Tigers. I mean, they could not get anything going offensively. They played TJ Finley and Robbie Ashford. Both got a chance at quarterback. Both of them threw 19 passes. Tank Bigsby couldn't get anything going running the football, really. 9 carries, 39 yards. Sean Clifford. We talk about Sean Clifford all the time. I mean, he's not my favorite quarterback in the world, but the guy has a ton of experience. He played pretty well yesterday. He had 14 carries for 19 yards, 178 yards, no picks, no touchdowns. But the big thing to me was Penn State finally ran the damn football.
Exactly.
39 carries, 245 yards, over 6 yards a carry, and 5 rushing touchdowns. When was the last time we saw that out of the Nittany Lions, James?
Well, you'd have to go back to 2019 when a guy named Journey Brown was sitting in their backfield. I mean, ever since he's left, that running game has been, anemic, pathetic. I mean, I don't know what correct word to use, but their offensive line, which was like the Achilles heel of James Franklin during his early time at Penn State, was rearing its head back up again. And this is the first time I've seen Penn State getting back to old Penn State football, and they just slobber knockered Auburn all over the place. I mean, you look at a lot of the stats and you're like, you look at 41-12 and you're like, yeah, that's a butt kicking. But you look at the stats and you're like, how did they do it? I mean, when you average 6.3 yards per rush for a team that really has not run the ball in 3 years, yeah, Penn State took it to them Big Ten style.
It did. And that's the one problem that Penn State's had the past couple of years. They just haven't been able to run the football.
No,
and
not at all.
It's put a lot on Clifford's shoulders. And we've seen when he's got a running game and the offensive line's playing well, Clifford can be all right and they can win games. But if they can't run the football, then they're in trouble. But the biggest takeaway from this game to me was that they could run on them and they kind of dominated the line of scrimmage. Big win, honestly, for James Franklin to go down to Auburn, take them out 41-12. But now here we go again with the people calling for the Auburn coach Brian Harsin to be fired. I read an article this morning that a lot of the fan base wants Deion Sanders to come and take over. Does Auburn start to fall apart now, James? I mean, we saw this happen last year. They're 2-1. I'm not sure why they're ready to roast this guy, at this point, but they've really only played Mercer and San Jose State, and they almost lost to San Jose State. I think they ended up winning 24-16, but this was the big game circled on their schedule to start the season, and they got shellackled. So what happens down there as the world of Auburn turns?
Yeah, I think next week they're going to win against Mizzou. I think we're going to really see what Auburn's made of October 1st when LSU comes to town. Yeah. Now, I'm not incredibly impressed with LSU, but because I think they have some serious depth issues. But I'm looking forward. That's going to be the game on the calendar they circle now. If LSU comes in there and slobber knockers them, yeah, Harson's going to lose his job. Now, it's funny you bring up Deion Sanders. I never would have even thought about this because it just seems like somebody Auburn wouldn't hire. But Auburn is an Under Armour school. And what's the one company that Deion is very connected with? Under Armour. So that's a real possibility. And I think the biggest winner in that would be Mike Norvell, because he doesn't have to hear his freaking alumni base talk about Deion Sanders one more freaking time. So,
I've heard Deion's name be mentioned so far as potentially going to Auburn or Georgia Tech. And I got to be honest, man, he's shown me that he can coach. As I told you, I saw him play coach in a high school game last year or 2 years ago when he came to town here in Knoxville, and I was very impressed with what he's done. And then since he's been at Jackson State, he's been tearing it up. And the big thing I think why this is being discussed is after next week's Auburn game versus Mizzou, as you mentioned, they play LSU on 10-1, then they play Georgia, then they play Ole Miss, then they play Arkansas, then they play Mississippi State, then they play Texas A&M, then they got a week against Western Kentucky, and then they play Bama. So the Auburn schedule is going to get real tough, and their first little test here didn't look good. And I think that's why people are starting to freak out.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens, but could be a little rough going down there. Now we had another game that maybe didn't have as many eyeballs on it, but two pretty good football teams in my opinion, and that is Wyoming versus Air Force. Wyoming came out of there with the win, 17-14. What did you get out of this game from the Falcons and the Cowboys, James?
Well, I mean, the Falcons lost their two starting receivers and starting running back in the Colorado game. And this is a team that I was predicting that could have run the table with their only real struggles on the schedule being at UNLV at San Diego State. Well, offensively in the first half, they were awful. Like, they had 44 yards rushing for a team that was leading the country in rushing in the first half. And they had to struggle, and they made it a game. And playing games in War Memorial, because it's always windy in Laramie, is tough because, Craig Bohl really knows how to run that team. I mean, Titus Sven is a very good running back that a lot of people don't know about across the country, but he's somebody you should watch. And they hung around, and they beat Air Force at the end. They scored a touchdown with 6 minutes to go to take the lead. And Air Force needs to be up front for them to take advantage of that situation. And offensively, they just did not play well, and Wyoming took out the victory and knocked off an undefeated team.
Yeah, no, it was a big win for them. There's no doubt. And hopefully will spell success for them moving forward. Two teams that I want to talk about here before we get. Now, remember, we got a guest coming up here in just a few minutes. But before we get to that, I want to talk really quickly about, two teams that we saw week one, FSU versus LSU. Kind of a surprise, both those games. We weren't sure exactly what those teams were coming into the game. We weren't sure what they were, honestly, after the game. But they both now have looked like they've gotten better. FSU took out Louisville. That was I believe, was that Friday night or Thursday?
Friday night, yeah.
Friday night, yeah. And a close game. But those were kind of games that Florida State in the past would have blown and probably would have, found a way to lose, I guess is the best way to say it. And LSU, I had a ton of question marks about them, but, they played a pretty decent Mississippi State team yesterday and found a way to win.
Yeah.
What's your opinion right now of Florida State and LSU, James? And where do you see those two teams going now that we've seen them play a couple more games?
Well, Florida State, you could just see the confidence is coming back to them over and over. Where in the past, during the end of Jimbo, Taggart, and even the previous administration, they early on in Norvell, they struggled and found ways to lose games. What you've seen this year is they found a way to pull games out, and they're believing they can win. Now, personnel-wise, I mean, they still got a ways to go. They don't have much depth. But, when you lose the amount of guys you lost, especially Jordan Travis in the Louisville game, and still find a way to win, That's a testament to Norvell and that staff. And quite frankly, with the ACC so wide open, they could do something. Now, LSU, this was a Brian Kelly type of game. The one thing I think they got to do is twofold. They got to find somebody to run the ball other than Jaden Daniels, and Boutte has got to see a more heavy dose of the football. So Jaden Daniels, if you don't know who Boutte is, go over and introduce yourself and make sure he sees 10 targets a game because he's a first-round receiver.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. They had to find someone to run the ball besides Jaden Daniels, and they had to find someone besides Jaden Daniels potentially to throw the ball. Is kind of what I was thinking after week one. But that was a big win for them in my opinion. And not that Mississippi State's going to win the title, but I was worried about LSU going into this game, and I thought that they might struggle.
I did too.
And I
thought Mississippi State would win it actually.
I did too.
And I got to give Brian Kelly credit. This is another Brian Kelly type of game where he just gets the team believing they can do something.
Hey, you know what? I think Notre Dame would take Brian Kelly back right now, considering what they looked like yesterday. They should have lost to Cal. I mean, Cal was completely dominating the game. Notre Dame, right before halftime, took the ball down into Cal territory. They went to Cal held them to a field goal. Notre Dame lined up for the field goal, kicked it, missed. There was a phantom offsides call, which maybe the guy was offsides. I don't know. But on a lot of the calls, it was 4th and 6. So how the hell did it go from 4th and 6 to all of a sudden being a first down for Notre Dame? And then they scored on the next play because Cal's defense was over there getting water. Half of them didn't even have their helmets on, and they had to run back out there. And that ended up being the difference in the game.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I was more – I know they won, but I was honestly less impressed with Notre Dame after watching them win yesterday than I was before. So I think they're in big-time trouble, and I'm not sure where the Irish go from here because Cal dominated them on the offensive line and defensive line at times, and the quarterback, Drew Pine, made a couple decent plays, but to me, didn't look like he was the answer. What do you think about the Irish at this point, James?
I don't think they've got an identity. That's their problems. Everything they're used to be good at, they are no longer good at, or basically known for. I mean, their offensive line has looked very pedestrian, especially when you look at a guy like Jarrett Patterson, who was, if he's not on somebody's All-American list, and you'd think you should get your eyes checked going into the season. But overall, that line of scrimmage play has just been brutal, and they just don't have depth at the receiver position. There's a lot that needs to go on there before the end of the year. But Tommy Rees has got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that some people were a little bitter towards Brian Kelly, and they were happy he was leaving. But honestly, Brian Kelly's a good coach. I know he's not the nicest guy in the world, and there's some people that would like to punch him as opposed to speak to him. But he won a lot of games at Notre Dame. And I think you're seeing a first-time head coach struggle to figure out how to put game plans together for the 4 quarters. What do you think about Marcus Freeman so far?
Well, I mean, heck, we've had quite a few people on here that have talked to him from playing with him and coaching with him. I think it's just a different animal coaching at Notre Dame because this is his first job. Yeah. And as a HC at the college level, I mean, do I think he'll get into it? Yeah. Do I think he's going to have some struggles in the meantime? Yeah, I do. I mean, it's just, when you're a defensive coordinator, how much do you have to really deal with boosters? Not much. Now, that's a lot of what your job is managing their expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer just go out there and put the defensive game plan together and that's it. You've got to handle everything. And I think it's a big change for anybody who's going into their head coach position for the first time ever. So, I think that he will get better. I do kind of believe in him in a way, but, will they give him enough time? I mean, will they give him enough of a chance to figure it all out? These fans loved him, before any games started being played. But after the first loss and then the second loss, the pressure starts to build, in my opinion. And
well, losing to Ohio State's one thing. Losing to Marshall is something completely different.
Marshall at home?
Yeah.
To go start the season 0-2, not great. So we'll see what happens. Before we're about to jump into our interview here, but before we do, I just wanted to touch on the big boys for a minute. Georgia took care of business once again yesterday, looked dominant, took out South Carolina, who is a SEC team. Now, South Carolina, in my opinion, has regressed from last year, which I didn't think would happen considering they got Spencer Rattler and had a really good season in year one, but they've looked not good. And Georgia kicked the crap out of them yesterday, 48-7. Bama took out UL Monroe, 63-7. And then Ohio State played Toledo, 77-21 was the final in that one. Now, I know you say Toledo. Well, I know they didn't have the toughest schedule, but Toledo came into the game ranked second in pass defense in the country, only allowing 50 yards per game. They were fourth in total defense. Toledo hasn't had a losing season in 13 years. And what happens to them? They come into the shoe, and the Buckeyes score touchdowns on 11 of their 13 drives in the game. And the 13th drive was a kneel down. CJ Stroud looked amazing. Ibuka had 7 catches, 116 yards. The Buckeyes had 3 wide receivers that had over 100 yards receiving. Ballard, Harrison, Smith and Jigba still looked a little banged up to me. Julian Fleming played in his first game. What did you think about the Buckeyes, first of all, and obviously the other two top 3 teams, James?
Ohio State's offense is legit. I think Dalen Hayden, though, is somebody that people should be talking about. The freshman really played well after Travion Henderson went down, but it also goes to show you the depth they have at receiving core and really how good a quarterback CJ Stroud truly is. I mean, he really diversified that passing offense yesterday, and it's very tough to defend Ohio State. Now, defensively, I think they did not as well defending Finn, the quarterback from Toledo. There is some question marks there, but overall, Ohio State's a juggernaut. Alabama, they're playing Louisiana Monroe. If they didn't whip up on them, it would have been a shocker. Georgia is playing very, very good ball. I mean, there was one play yesterday where they ran a reverse to their tight end. I mean, when do you see that?
Not very
Never.
Often.
I mean, they're just a legit team. I mean, there's the top 3 teams, and who gets that 4th spot is going to be very key.
Yeah. And I'm going to have to, watch these 3 teams a little bit more to see, whether or not anybody can beat Georgia right now. I don't think so. But, people were worried about the Buckeye offense. CJ Stroud in 3 games has 950 yards, 11 touchdowns, no picks. So I ain't worried about the Buckeyes offense. We just need to see this defense progress if they want to be, toe-to-toe with Bama and Georgia come the end of the season, don't you think?
Agreed.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and bring on our guest. We've got the 1989 College Football Player of the Year, 1990 National Championship quarterback from the Colorado Buffaloes, Darian Hagan. He's been a coach on staff at Colorado since 2002, I think he tells us. Hope everybody enjoys this interview. This guy was one of my heroes when I was a kid. And honestly, after meeting him, he's more of one of my heroes now. So, James, we're going to go ahead and bring on Darian Hagan to the show, and we will come back after the interview and close it out. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Man Coverage with Knoxville Nate JB, James Bonneville. We got a special guest today with us, Mr. Darian Hagan from Colorado. Darian, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. We really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us today. We want to take you a little bit back today when we bring you on the show. We want to talk a little bit about the old glory days and talk about that team from the Buffaloes, 89, 90, 91. First off, coming out of LA and Southern California. What drew you to Colorado when you were being recruited, obviously, by several schools? What was it that, made Colorado stand out and, got you to the Buffaloes? Was it coach? Was it the school, the program? What all was it, Coach?
It was definitely the coach. A lot of people say that you're not supposed to buy into one person and one or you'll get at the end of the day there's a possibility you'll get hurt or you get left at the altar. And I didn't look at it that way. I had offers from a bunch of different schools, and it came down. I'll tell you the top five. It was Colorado, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Washington, and Arizona.
Okay.
Arizona was rolling at the time. They were running the option with Dick Tomey, and I liked the way he recruited me, and Arizona was high profile in Los Angeles, so they were at my school all the time, so I was attracted to them. And then when I took my visits, the first school I visited was Oklahoma. My family's from Oklahoma, so I was raised a Sooner. So I knew that if the opportunity existed, that I would go there and check it out, and maybe even go to school there. I would love to play with my idol Jamel Holloway, and and Jamel, when I got on my visit, Jamel Holloway was like, "Hey man, you don't want to come here. They're gonna move you to running back." I'm just so I'm thinking he's hating on me, right? So I'm like, okay, all right. And so I believed him, and it was like I kind of stiffed armed him. And then my next visit was Nebraska, and I went down there. I was on my trip, literally on my trip for 6 hours, and I realized that the city of Lincoln and Darien Hagan could not coexist, man. So I made up a telltale, man, to get out of there quick, and I flew home. Man, and I never talked to them guys again. But one of the reasons why I knew I wasn't going there was, I grew up in a time, man, where Crips and Bloods were high profile, and I knew if I went to Nebraska and I went back home, in my neighborhood was all Crips, I couldn't wear anything in Nebraska.
No.
And I was like, nah. And it's crazy at the time. It's crazy how you had to think, because if you didn't think outside the box, there's an opportunity. I go home, man, I get sniped.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I can't go here. And then Arizona was too hot. University of Washington, I went down there on my visit, man. It rained the whole time, and you got to remember, it was 1988, man. I had a Jerry curl. And my Jerry curl, I knew if I went to Washington, my Jerry curls gonna get washed out. I knew my perm was gonna be horrible. So I was like, I couldn't do that. And then when I came to Colorado, unbeknownst to me, we had 35 guys on our team from Southern California that I either played with or heard of or played with. So I was like, okay, this is a good fit. But then Coach McCartney was what I was looking for. I was looking for a father figure. I was looking for a second family. I was looking for protection, a safety net, and I found it here, and the rest is history, man.
What about Coach? I mean, you've seen so many things on TV about Coach McCartney and his staff. What about him? Like, what could you say that like most people wouldn't know about him that drew you to him? Like, what was his culture like in the locker room, off the field?
It was a tough culture, but it was tough love, which every person like myself that didn't have a father in the home, you're looking for tough love. You're looking for, like I said, you're looking for a safety net. And with him, he provided that safety net. He was going to protect you. He was going to make sure you did all the things that you were supposed to do right on the field and off the field. And a kid like me, man, I was the meal ticket to everybody in my house. So my whole thought process was I needed to go someplace where this guy was whoever's going to be coaching me was going to motivate me and put enough fear in me to be, to do the right things all the time, even when people weren't looking. Yeah. And I knew that when he came in my living room and sat down with my family, my entire family knew, and I knew that was the right man for what I was trying to accomplish. And he's a guy that he could, gravitate people toward him. He can control the room. He can control environments. And, what he did was he recruited people that he knew needed love, who needed direction, and who badly wanted to win and was super competitive. And that's what we had on our team.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And there was something special on those teams. I mean, you talk about it, those 3 years in a row. I mean, 20-0-1 in the Big Eight, Darian. I mean, that's that's all right. You know, I mean, especially considering who you guys were playing those days. I mean, you had the coach, they had the quarterback. You know, you guys had athletes, but there's always something that makes those championships teams special. What was it that you know, helped you guys get over the hump and win that title and you know, just have so much success?
Well, I can tell you, you know, a lot of people say everything, you know, rises and falls on leadership.
Yep.
You know, coach from top to bottom, our leadership was dynamic. You know, Coach McCartney was the leader. Everybody knew it. No one second guessed him. No one, you know, would go against him or anything like that. And then you know, every coach, you know, we had, I think out of the 9 coaches at the time, I think 7 of them became head coaches.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that tells you something, that he picked the right people, you know, and we picked the right program for what we were trying to accomplish, you know. But you know, the leadership top to bottom, man. And then Coach McCartney also did something that I haven't been a part of since. You know, as a freshman, you know, when you came to campus, you know, the person that you was going to be with, most people were going to be with their roommates, you know. But he didn't put the freshmen with their roommate. He put with a guy that he knew. He put the freshman with a senior, and that senior was in charge of that freshman until that senior left. And then when that senior left, you know, and that freshman became a sophomore, that sophomore was in a leadership role, but now he was connected with a junior. Okay. And then when that junior went to a senior, that sophomore now became a junior, and then that junior was in charge of the sophomore. So the leadership role was always embedded, and we were always thinking about take care of my little brother. You know, so our big brothers, man, you know, it was that type of atmosphere, and you know, everybody wanted to be like their big brother. So everybody, we fell in line, and everybody just wanted to do the right things, and you know, it was a brotherhood, man. And Sal Inessi, when he went down with, you know, inoperable stomach cancer, you know, everybody knew, you know, that, hey, our fallen leader, you know, he's gone, man. But what would he expect out of us? And every time we hit the football field, man, we pointed to the sky, and we just thought about him, man. And we went out there, we knew every game was going to be a 60-minute game. You know, people say that in like a cliche, but we knew it, and we were ready for it. You know, Coach McCartney took care of us, man. So where when we played Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Missouri at the time, back to, you know, 3 weeks in a row, he wouldn't even put us in pads, because he knew that we were going to be, you know, be tough enough, competitive enough to do the right thing. So we didn't have to put on pads. We knew how to practice. We knew how to take care of each other. And then when it was go time, man, we had war daddies, and we went to work.
You know, it's interesting listening to you talk about the passing down of the culture. It's more than just the coaches and the assistant coaches. It's the players bringing it down too as well. I think that's fascinating. Honestly, it's brilliant, because, you know, it's, you know, bad teams, no one leads. You know, good teams, coaches lead. Elite teams, the players lead. And I could see, and you could see how Coach really instilled that on you guys. You know, getting back to Sal's passing, did you feel a lot of pressure on you since you were coming in as the starting quarterback? Because it seemed like, especially, I've watched so many 89, 90 games. When Nate was talking about way back in the past, I'm like, I remember this like it was yesterday in my head.
Right.
And it was just like, it seemed like the game just felt slowed down for you in 89, and especially in 90. Like 89, there was a lot of emotion on his passing, but 90 was very much, you know, it was business. Like you guys had him, it was finishing business. What was your mindset coming in on that, with all that, with Sal being talked about in every interview as every game got closer to the Orange Bowl?
Right. I can tell you this, when I took over for Sal Inessi, man, I had no idea that I would be, you know, put in that situation so early. So I can take you back and let you ride along with me. So it was we're going through spring ball, and usually, you know, I'm still in my freshman year going into my sophomore season, and you know, it's in the spring when when in college, man, everybody trying to hang out and party and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So we go to spring ball and all that, but guys are hanging out and it's free time, on weekends, and you don't have to play ball. And I thought that Sal Nessie was a guy that was just going out and partying and all this stuff, because every time we would run, he couldn't finish a run. And we used to say amongst ourselves, man, Sal need to quit partying, man. He drinking and stuff, man. He need to quit partying. And so it was on we would run in condition on Wednesday, and it was a Wednesday. The second time we did it, he started throwing up, and went to a trash can. I went by him, patted him on the back, like, come on, man, we got to finish, we'll be all right. And when I looked in the trash can, it was blood. I was like, oh, what's going on?
Oh,
And then we break and go to spring break, and I'm in California, and we hadn't even really started, with the football stuff. So I just know my freshman year, I was horrible. I didn't know the offense. I didn't know what I was doing. I was out there playing on just being scared and playing in instincts. I was ill-advised, making ill-advised plays, and nobody believed in me. Guys just like, dang, we got this dude here. He don't never be any good. And I knew nobody had faith in me. And so I got home for spring break, and I just got to working out with my buddies from high school, and those guys went to college as well. And we just worked out, man, and get a call from Coach Barnett, and he says, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Coach, I just got to working out." He goes, "Good, good." He said, "I got some news. I want you to sit down." I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, "You're gonna be the starting quarterback." I'm like, "What? We haven't even started spring ball. How you gonna tell me that?" He goes, "Well, Sal Nessie has inoperable stomach cancer, and he has 6 months to live."
Oh my God.
And when he said that, I grew up overnight.
Real quick.
I knew that in order for us to reach our goals, and we had a lot of guys on our team who wanted to go to the NFL, who had at those aspirations, and we had guys that we knew that were top-notch NFL players. So I just took it serious to the point where if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I'm holding back and hindering all these guys' their futures. And I decided, right then and there, that I was going to change my whole identity, my whole mental makeup. I started studying. I started meeting with Coach Barnett, 2 or 3 times a day, and then once we started spring ball, it was go time, man. I knew the plays like it was like high school, man. I had videos all the time. I was always watching film. So I was so, well versed in our offense and defenses, to where defense be milling around. I knew exactly what they were going to be in their final formations, and I would get us in the right play. And guys were like, "Man, how you knew they was going to line up that way?" I said, "By film study."
Yep.
And then, and then the season started, man. We started rolling, but if Sal Nessie and his illness was the linchpin to me, doing the things that I needed to do to help the University of Colorado, reach its desired goals. And man, it was awesome. It was a blessing just to see it happen. But the unfortunate thing, was the passing of Sal. But
Yeah.
he his legacy lives on because of the type of person he was, and everybody on our team never forget, who Sal Nessie is. We talk about him all the time. Our teams were so close, man. And we probably have out of the guys of the national championship team, I would say probably 60 to 70 of those guys still live here in Colorado, and we see each other all the time.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, granted, Boulder's a beautiful place. I mean, like we were trying to figure out what picture to put up as the background, and I'm like, if it's got the mountains, you're pretty good off. I mean, you had such an amazing, like, between coaches, players, people. I mean, people who was that person that gave you the best advice that helped you not only as a player, but in your professional life, in your coaching life, that you could help pass that culture and thought process down? I mean, I was sitting there I asked this question of everybody, and I'm like thinking about you. I'm like, man, there's probably like 20 people you could probably mention. That's why I'm like really intrigued about this answer.
Right. Well, you're right. It's a lot of people that I can say that helped me, ascend to the things that I was able to accomplish here. but I can say the one person that helped me on a daily basis, who helped me become a man, who gave me my start in coaching, who told me I would be a good coach if I gave it a shot, and that would be Gary Barnett.
Yeah.
You know, Coach Barnett, he was the guy who took over the recruiting process. You know, our running back coach Oliver Lucas, who was a coach in California. You know, he was the guy who started it off and got me you know, very, very interested in Colorado. And then Coach Barnett took over, and then once Coach Barnett took over, man, you know, and I came here. You know, I was with him all the time, man. It got to the point where no one knows this, but I'm gonna say it. When I hurt my knee, you know, in the championship game, and I knew I couldn't go home and hang out with family and all that stuff, so I had to come back here after the championship game, and I had to get surgery. And at the time, Coach Barnett was building a new house in Boulder. He was actually in Niwot, which is like 15 minutes outside of Boulder, but he was building a new house, and he changed his plans on the house because he knew I was going to be around, and he built me a room in the basement.
Wow.
You
That's
know,
pretty cool, man.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
So Coach Barnett, you know, he was that guy, man. And then when football was over for me, you know, I was here in Boulder working, and he would always call me like, man, I want you to come coach. I want you to give it a try. I'm like, Coach, I ain't doing that. I said, man, I got 2 kids by 2 different women, and if I don't work, you know, the judge gonna throw me up under the jail when I miss child support pay. So he says to me, he goes, how much money you make? And I was making like 60,000. I told him, I said, I'm making 150. And he goes, he told and he says, you're a liar. I already checked. And so he so what happened was I came and coached, and so they gave me my GA salary, which is equivalent of a full scholarship, but it was like $80,000 a year, and he paid me $100,000 out of his own pocket.
Damn.
To be a graduate assistant. I did that for 6 months, and when we had 2 coaches that came in, and they left in spring.
Yeah.
And they came and interviewed actually, and our receiver coach had left. Ted Gilmore here left to go to Nebraska.
Yep.
And coach goes, we had 2 guys come and interview, and he goes, like, I want you to go interview, and he said, I want guys that want to be here. We had one of the guys showed up with jeans, cowboy boots, t-shirt, and a blazer, and coach kicked him out, didn't let him interview. and he tells me to get ready, and I went down and I got ready. And the first guy I interviewed, they asked him all these questions, man, and I was writing down all the answers and putting my own answers to the question. So when I interviewed, they asked me the exact same question they asked that guy, and I already had rehearsed. And I interviewed, and they was like, yeah, you got the job. And I started working there, man, and I've been here ever since. This is 2002.
Yeah, 18 years, right?
Yeah.
18 years, man. That's saying something. So I got to ask you, 18 years, what are you thinking about now? I mean, we got people being recruited when they're freshmen. We got people getting paid to, you know, go to school places, the NIL money. You got the transfer portal. I mean, it's so different now. I mean, how do you take what you knew from the old days and implement it with what's going on now, D? And what do you think about, what do you think about all this stuff? You know, how do you develop players when you may develop them and they get good and then they go somewhere else? I mean, how do you deal with all that?
Well, you just identified Jarek Broussard.
Yeah.
Jarek Broussard, the running back at Minnesota.
Yeah.
You know, he was a 2-star recruit. Nobody wanted him. He come off a blown knee. He comes here, he developed the guy. He was a starter for me for 2 years. And then you know, he got offered, you know, NIL money to go to Michigan State. You know, he went down, so he leaves, and then you know, now I'm in the process of starting all over again, trying to develop guys. You know, but at the same time, I don't like it. But at the same time, you know, I want the kids, if the kids can get paid, and that's the way the game is right now, they deserve to get paid. Go get paid. It's like free agency, but it hurts programs and things like that. But I'm a firm believer in loyalty, and loyalty outwins everything. And if you have loyalty to anything, you're supposed to stick by it.
Yeah.
Okay. And with a guy leaving because of NLI money and things of that nature, what are you going to do when things get tough with your family? Are you going to leave your family because you got a better job and you got a prettier woman out there? What are you going to do? You go and do all those things because somebody is sexier than your wife, then shame on you.
Yeah.
But I do agree with the money part of it. If you can make some money, we got to pay these guys.
Yeah.
Coaches are making a lot of money, and the kids deserve to get some of it. I don't agree with the millions of dollars that these kids are getting and things of that nature. But I can tell you this: if someone gave me $1 million a coach, I'm damn sure gonna coach.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So I just,
I'll take it.
You know what I mean? So
they've been paying these coaches millions for years, and the money's there,
right.
and these kids deserve it. But as Coach Stoops from Kentucky said, the whole system of it was kind of designed to pay kids that have been in a program and help the program, win and help the program, get revenue. But that's, not necessarily how it's being used. So hopefully there'll be some bumpers put in and some restrictions maybe put in place to make it, functionable in the future.
I hope so. I hope so, because what they're doing right now, they're rating programs.
Yeah.
And, I like you said, the NIL deal, that's supposed to be a fair game for everybody. But, a lot of people are, they're rating programs and giving guys more money where other programs can't match it or do the same thing. So, I don't think it's an even playing field. And, if college football wants to be fair and equal, they need to have a even playing field.
I agree.
Well, not only going on that, but like conference hopscotch that's happening so much now. Heck, the old Big 8 became the Big 12, and then Nebraska left, Missouri left, Colorado left, Oklahoma, Texas left, A&M left. Is it is it harder? Before in the Big 12, heck, back when you played, you always expected that Friday after Thanksgiving was CU Nebraska. How do you is it harder to build those new rivalries up when you're in a new conference? How do you do that? Because there's just no tradition to fall back on.
Right. There's no tradition to fall back on. Like you said, man, everybody knew Thanksgiving, Colorado and Nebraska gonna play. Everybody knew it. You geared up for it, and now it doesn't exist anymore. It's like a downer, but then we go to the Pac-12 and we try to manufacture a rival game, and that rival game, we try to rival with with Utah, but it ain't the same.
Yeah.
The only thing's the same is the red colors.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
other than that, it don't feel the same. It ain't the same, and you can't pretend.
Yeah.
I would be remiss at not asking this question, but I'm guessing if you never hear about the 5th down game ever again, you'd be happy in life. Was the field that bad at Fraught that day? It was everything I heard, it was like a slip and slide. Was it awful?
It was awful. I can tell you this. I was playing with a tender shoulder, and I fell probably about 10 times on my shoulder just because of the turf. And if the turf wasn't as slippery as it was, I probably would have did some really good things. But it was a surface, it was a sand surface that supposed to got watered down before the game, and they never watered it down. And so it became, like you said, a slippery slide. And man, I can still remember the number. We had 168 slides in that game. 168. If we didn't have those, we'd kick their butt.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I that was one of the games I rewatched, and I'm like when everything was going down at the end, did you know what was going on, or was just kind of oh, it's 4th down, let's go? Or you were so in the moment that you just didn't realize till after the fact?
Yeah, it was after the fact. We were so in the moment, man. We didn't know anything. Only thing we knew was we had a system, and we knew our 4 plays we'd always run in when those things happen, and that's exactly what we did. We didn't know any other thing but to keep playing football.
Yeah.
And when we get back on the plane and we leave, and that's when we got the controversy where we didn't even I had no idea what people were talking about.
Yeah. Well, hey, I always told James I liked it better back in the old day, man. There was some mistakes made, but there was flow to the games. Like now, every damn play, they stop it, they look at it, they go look it up, they get some more commercials going on, and it's ridiculous. At least back then, you got to get a flow of the game, and there was momentum that could be done. So I liked it better that way. But I just know I'll always remember you. I was telling James, I went back and watched some tape, and I remember, the thing that always stuck out to me was you'd be running, going down the line, somebody hit you, defensive end hits you, safety hits you, and you're like, oh, he's going to get a 4-yard loss. And all of a sudden you pitch it. I'd be like, where's he throwing it? Some guy come out of nowhere and catch it and go and run to the.
It seemed like it was always Flanagan too. Like Flanagan, pop up out of the blue. He's not even in the stadium, and there comes Flanagan with the ball. I mean, it was just crazy. There must have been some ESP between you two.
You know what? It was so funny. Every time in practice when I was a freshman, I would run the ball and I would just take off running, and when I would run, I'll be looking for a guy to pitch it to. Yeah. And our running back coach came up to me. He's like, "Hey man, why don't you just run?" I was like, "Well, when I was in high school, they taught the running backs to stay with us. Yeah. So I'm looking for a pitch," and he goes, you guys did that in high school? I was like, yeah, that's what we did in high school, and we got a lot of touchdowns off of it. So that day, he told the running backs, anytime he turned that ball up and started running, you guys follow him. And the only one that had enough speed to stay up with me was Flanagan. Bieniemy, at the time we didn't know he was going to be 300 pounds, but he wasn't trying to get down there.
Man. One more question I got to ask you. 89 Orange Bowl, when you guys run out in the field, and Notre Dame tries to do the Miami thing where they come out in midfield, and they were standing there, and you guys came out and matched them. I remember when I first watched, I'm like, oh, they're trying to do Miami, and then I'm watching it today, I'm like, they're joking around with each other. I could see you and Tony Rice shaking hands and laughing with one another, and it was what was going on during that whole back and forth? McCartney's eyes were it's go time. He was something's gonna go down right there.
And we did too. They came out and we looked at it as an intimidation method. And our guys were, they wanted to go jaw to jaw with these guys, and they went out and met them. And I was going out to meet them too. And then I happened to look to my right, and I seen Tony. And Tony and I had just got back from the Heisman ceremony, so we just hugged each other and started laughing and talking. That's but awesome. But the other guys are ready to fight. But me and Tony we hugged it out.
That's awesome, man. That's two of my favorite players of all time was Tony Rice and Darian Hagan. So
thank you.
Man, we love watching you, man, and we really do appreciate you coming on today, man. I know your time is valuable, so we appreciate you spending some time with us. And
thank you guys, man. Anytime, man. I'd love to come back on and shoot the breeze with you guys, man. This is awesome.
It's an honor. I enjoyed watching you play. You think of Colorado football, you think of Darian Hagan and Coach McCartney. Literally, you guys are what people think of when you think of, the reascendance of the program. There was the year before when you went to the Freedom Bowl, first time in 12 years, you guys won 8 games. And then next year you go to the national championship. The year after that, you take it. It's a testament to your hard work.
Yeah.
Right. No, I appreciate you, man. It was a testament to my hard work and all the guys that I was trying to make sure that they was going to reach their goals. And at the same time, man, it was all about brotherhood and family.
Yeah. Well, you got it done, man. And I hope you get it done this weekend too. I don't know about James.
I do too.
Gophers over there, but I hope you kick their ass.
I wish you good luck. Well, I do.
You see, Chase, he turned the hat backwards.
Yeah. I told him, I said, what are you doing? We jumped on. I go, what are you doing, man? Get you another hat. He's like, it's the only hat I got.
Right.
Come on, man.
It's all good. It's all good.
Hey, I went to the U. I got to represent. When you put the tuition in, you got to do what you got to do. So, hey, Minnesota will welcome you. I'm only 30 minutes away from the stadium, so it'll be a nice.
Come on down.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Go down and see him, James. All right, Darian, we'll let you get out of here, man. I know you got a bunch of stuff to do, but we do appreciate you, and we'll be cheering for you as always, man.
You got it.
Okay,
Thanks
man.
again.
I appreciate you guys, man. Thanks for having me, and go Buffs.
All right, safe travels, buddy.
All right, thank you.
All right, that was Darian Hagan, legend of college football, 1989 College Football Player of the Year, 1990 National Champion. Really great interview with him, man. I sometimes you meet your heroes and you're disappointed, but I got to tell you, meeting him and getting a chance to know him a little bit and hear about him, hear stories from him from his own mouth. It was pretty cool, and he's just a great guy and was a great player as well. So we'll see what happens with the Buffaloes as we move forward. But that guy's been there a long time and survived a bunch of different coaches and, been a great running backs coach on top of being a great player. What did you think about talking to him, James?
Well, you sit back and think about the work. You always think about the 3 hours you see him on Saturdays. But can you imagine the amount of lives he's transformed, not only on the field, but off the field from his work from there on out? I mean, I kept going back to the culture that Coach McCartney set for that team. And you could definitely tell he is, not only taking what he's learned, but enhanced upon it too, as well, to the people of Colorado and to the university football team.
I agree. Yeah, he's definitely guy could do whatever he wants, as we said. I mean, he was working, he was making good money, but he wanted to come back and help kids and teach them the game that he loves. So I'm glad he did that because I know kids are benefiting from that, and we'll see what happens. But it was a great interview with him. I really appreciate Darian coming on the show with his busy schedule. It was really cool that he made time for us. And got another great week of college football. We got a great week coming up next. We're going to get out of here. But before we go, I just want to say next week I'm looking forward mostly to seeing what happens at Clemson-Wake Forest game. I think is a good chance to see if Clemson can survive and actually beat a halfway decent team. We'll see. Wake Forest struggled a little bit this week, so I don't know. But I haven't been impressed with Clemson thus far. So we'll see what they can do. You got your boys Minnesota 3-0 playing against Michigan State, who's limping in, and then Florida, Tennessee. What other games are you looking forward to, James?
It's funny you bring that up, but I'm going to go back to that Arkansas-Texas A&M game. Yeah. I think that is going to dictate what Texas A&M really is. Yeah. K-State at Oklahoma. K-State always seems like they have OU's number, no matter if it's in the Little Apple or down in Norman. Oregon State, Washington State. One is Washington State for real. Oregon, can they continue what they're doing? I mean, there's just a lot of good games in the slate next week to see who's who and what's what. But I think the biggest crime to humanity is how is College Game Day not going to Lawrence, Kansas to see 3-0 KU against 3-0 Duke? Because those are two teams that nobody's expected. Heck, either one of them were what 2.5 victories that Vegas was predicting them to have, and we're not even to October yet, and they've already beaten their victory totals.
Yeah, well, it's ESPN, so that doesn't shock me. But
exactly,
Wisconsin's playing Ohio State. That should be a pretty good game. Hopefully not, but it may be. And then, as we mentioned, Florida, Tennessee. That's where they actually are going. So we'll see if Tennessee can beat Florida. Florida almost went down to South Florida. Honestly, got pretty much handled that whole game, and luckily pulled out a victory with a field goal. But you were talking about that Kansas State. Kansas State went down to Tulane yesterday, so that was kind of a shocker. But it should still be a good game, as they usually do play Oklahoma tough. Now, I got to give credit to Coach Venables at Oklahoma. I wasn't very high on them coming into the season, but I have to admit they played great so far. I mean, they've exceeded all my expectations for sure. We'll see if they can hang on and put it to K-State. We got a little comment here. A&M, best team money can buy. You think if you have a collective dropping $10+ million to bring kids into your program, you might be able to beat App State. But as we mentioned, they couldn't. They got handled by App State. They won yesterday against Miami, but Arkansas isn't going to lay down. And Coach Pittman, I know they struggled a little bit with Missouri State yesterday, but that was, that was old Coach Motorcycle Man coming into town and laying it to them. So we'll see what happens. But I think Arkansas is definitely the favorite in my mind for that game. I don't know about you, James.
Agreed, 100%. I'm taking Arkansas in that game because Sam Pittman just finds to make it happen, and he does more with less than probably anybody in the country. And yes, sir,
he definitely does, and I like him. I got a chance to meet Coach Pittman a couple times, and I think what he's done at Arkansas, as I've mentioned several times on the show, is remarkable. So we'll see if he can get it done next week. But another great show, another great week of college football. As I mentioned, we really appreciate Darian Hagan coming on the program today and joining us. Dude is a true hero, a great coach, great player, great guy, and hope for all the best for him moving forward in the future. But thanks to everybody for tuning in. We appreciate you, and we hope we tune you in. Hope you guys all tune in next week. Adios, James.
Hey, see you later. Have a great week.
All right, keep your chin up.